Good morning. This is Mary Pat Young coming to you from the Chapel of the Cross. We are inviting members of our community to share about their spiritual lives and practices. And so today we'll be talking with Joe Cosby, our Director of Music at the Chapel of the Cross. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Joe, we're just going to jump right in. And so I would love for you to share a little bit with us about your earliest experience or relationship between music and your faith life.
Well, I remember, I started playing the piano when I was 2, and then I started formal lessons when I was 4. And I grew up in the Methodist Church in a small town in Western North Carolina, Morganton, North Carolina. And for me, I think music and my faith and spiritual background, they're inseparable. I can't really think of a time when they weren't connected. So I started playing in church when I was 6 years old or something, playing in Sunday school or for children's choir. And I sang in the children's choirs growing up, and then started playing weekly in church when I was about 8 years old. So it is my earliest memory of them being together. I don't recall a time when they were separate.
Is there a particular song that relates to your family experience or connection to church, or a childhood memory or youth memory of something that spoke to you in the lyrics as well as the music?
I think the one that I still think about this. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. We all lived in the same town, but my grandfather was the lay leader for the Western North Carolina Conference of the Methodist Church. And I spent every summer at Lake Junaluska and sort of beyond Asheville up in the mountains. And I remember singing this one hymn every year, and it was at the beginning of annual conference, and the hymn was, "And Are We Yet Alive?" And the first line is, "And are we yet alive and see each other's face?" And so that has stuck with me. It's not a tune that we necessarily sing in the Episcopal Church, but that hymn is always, somehow it's always in my mind. It's one I've been thinking about when we do come back together after this episode we're in now. That would be a good hymn to sing.
That sounds really beautiful. Yes, I think so. Would you talk a little bit about the instruments that you play, and perhaps you have a variety of instruments in your home, and I know your spouse also is a music director, and so maybe some of those are shared instruments, and maybe there's some particular to you.
So I'm slightly boring. I primarily play keyboard instruments with a keyboard. In school, in junior high and high school, I played the trumpet. I was in band and in marching band and all that, which was great fun, but I was never very good. I was usually second chair because I could read and I could count, but I didn't have the best sound. But I served a purpose. But in our home here, we have a piano and a practice organ, and then you can see behind me there's a harp, and there's actually another harp on the other side. Bob, my husband, plays the harp and keyboard instruments, and he also plays the cello and the viola da gamba. So we have those instruments, and in another room there's a harpsichord, so another keyboard instrument. But primarily I'm a keyboard instrument player.
That's really wonderful. Are there some incredible instruments in the world that you have had the opportunity to play on, or particular places that music has taken you that you'd like to talk with us about or share with us about?
I think as far as places go, English cathedrals have been very formative in my life. I had the privilege of being an English organ scholar and did an advanced degree in Durham, England, in the northeast of England. And being in those spaces, particularly at night practicing, you can feel the depth and the spirit in the space of the hundreds of years of people who have worshipped in those places. I never felt alone, even if I was the only one in the building. And it wasn't the scary sort of ghost type feeling, but just this sort of profound sense of depth and warmth in that building. As far as instruments go, I had the privilege of playing at Saint-Sulpice in Paris. on the Kavaya Cole organ there, and that was a moment I will never forget. It was a terrifying moment, and it was also a really, really wonderful experience.
What was terrifying about it? What brought that emotion up for you?
I think knowing that I was playing an instrument that so many famous composers, and other people had played before me, and also it was part of a live concert that the Durham Cathedral Choir was doing in that space, and the other organist and I had to play solo pieces, and we got basically 10 minutes of rehearsal time on a strange instrument that we did not know, and then you have to turn around and perform for a live audience who is critical.
Wow, and you made it through that gamut of challenges. And what did it feel like to be on the other side of that experience?
It was a relief. I probably didn't breathe for the 20 minutes leading up to it. And then after it was over, somehow I managed to get myself under control and to play. And luckily it went well. And I felt good about it when it was over, and was very glad that it was over.
So that's a very particular kind of performance where, as you said, you were in front of an audience, you were showing off an instrument as much as your own talents. You have chosen a career in music leadership, and you're playing for our congregation in some ways. Not the same performance as like a ticketed event, but you provide music as part of our worship life and leadership in that. Would you talk a little bit about what that's like, or maybe the difference between a performance experience like you described and music leadership in a community context?
I think in some ways they're two very different mediums, and in other ways they're exactly the same. I think the part that makes solo performance type things easier for me is when I think about the fact that it's a community event. Everyone is actually in the moment together. The listener is engaging with you, so it helps to take the focus off of me being on a stage by myself. I think what's so wonderful about working in a church community and with other people, particularly volunteer singers, is that it's a group effort. We all need each other. Not one person can't do it all. I think we all bring different skills, and those skills are different every time we walk in the door. I think some of the best rehearsals that I've been a part of with choirs are ones where the people who maybe aren't the best musicians in the room shape how the rehearsal goes because of their positive attitude and love of the music and love of the people. And so that's what is so appealing to me, and what feeds my soul is doing it together, knowing that we all bring different pieces to make the whole as strong as possible.
So that is just such an incredible gift of bringing together your spirit along with the spirit and the spiritual lives of others. You're not only our wonderful organist, but you also direct choirs, you organize the community that is our different children's choir groups. Could you talk with us a little bit about the leadership aspect of being a choir director, that what that entails, how that's different than playing the organ in church in those times when we're as a community singing together, but that all that time in the background, all that time leading up, the care and the leadership that you provide to our choral community?
I always think about something that one of my mentors, Marilyn Kaiser, has said, that her teacher, Alec Whiten, who was at St. John the Divine in New York City, used to say about our role as a leader and as a church musician, and that it's threefold. And first, we are a pastor. Second, we are a teacher. And third, we are a musician. And I think that I always coming into it, thinking about it that way, helps to ground me and to meet, all of our singers where they are. I think, the success of the group is based on everyone coming along at the same time and not leaving anyone behind. And it's hard when you have over 100 people in a choir program, because everyone's talent level and experience level is different, vastly different. And even with our youngest singers who are 4 years old, some of them are just learning to read or recognize letters in the alphabet. So how can you meet them where they are and teach them something that will hook them into realizing that music can form and change their lives in the church?
Would you share a little bit about the genres of music that are particularly meaningful to you? Music that you go to listen to when you need to be at rest or be in prayer, not just the music that you're reviewing in preparation for the work of the community or liturgy?
I would have to say that I don't really go to organ music necessarily. I love organ music and I love to listen to it. I tend to go toward choral music, actually, for some strange reason. I always have CDs in the car that are of choirs or of early music ensembles in Europe and things like that. That tends to really ground me and calm me down. Having grown up in the United Methodist Church, the hymns of Charles Wesley are very meaningful to me. And if you've noticed, a lot of the hymns we sing at the Chapel of the Cross that come from our hymnal have that Wesley tie to them. I think there's something about those texts that I find incredibly calming, and it pulls up memories of my family, particularly my grandparents. And I think about them, I'm immediately transported to a place. I remember one time my grandfather said, he owned the Buick dealership in town, so he was a car dealer by trade, but then worked as a volunteer quite widely in the Methodist Church. And he said one time, I don't know what I would do without my church family, and how meaningful that was. And I've never forgotten that. I was probably 6 or 7 years old when I remember him saying that. And so when I am reminded of the music that accompanied my life at that time, I think of that, which is very comforting, I think, to me.
That's wonderful. So Joe, you have chosen music leadership in a community for your career, and you've done that in a variety of settings. Would you talk with us a little bit about what it's like to plan for a season of music, to be a part of the liturgy planning team, some of the background work that we don't see when we see you playing on Sunday morning or leading a rehearsal on a Wednesday nights?
I think planning the music is probably my most favorite thing that I get to do, because you get to dream. You get to dream about what you want to create for others to experience, for them to experience what so deeply inside is something that you love. And I'm really fortunate that all the places where I've worked, I've had excellent colleagues that work collaboratively. No one person can do it by themselves. I think it's bringing all the creativity together. But as far as resources, our greatest resource is the Book of Common Prayer. I think it grounds us and it guides us. And along with that, we have the lectionary. The Episcopal Church puts out a musician's handbook every year, which gives suggested hymns for the day, which is always a good starting point. I tend to rely pretty heavily on that. Also, the Royal School of Church Music puts out a publication called Sunday by Sunday, where they suggest hymns and anthems. So, beyond what we know is meaningful to our community at certain times of year, those resources are helpful. So I try to do as much research ahead of time with those before we go into our Thursday liturgy meetings. So if people do have suggestions or we have other ideas, we can put it together. And hymns and music are planned 6 months to a year ahead of time. It is not a week-to-week occurrence. We wouldn't be able to learn things fast enough if that were the case. So it involves a lot of advanced preparation, but I find joy in that and the discipline of sitting down and reading through the lessons weeks and weeks ahead of time.
Thank you. So as we come to a close here, I wonder if perhaps in this time of separation and finding ways to create music uniquely, or to have music has been such an infusion and such an important part of our communal response to some of the liturgies we've been doing online. I wonder if there is a particular hymn or piece of music that you'd want to commend to us to help us through this time, or that you are leaning on as we make our way through this wilderness and look forward to the day that we're together again.
I think I always go back to Charles Wesley and the hymn that I had mentioned earlier, and I found my Methodist hymnal and the hymn "And Are We Yet Alive?" And the first line, the first verse, the text is, "And are we yet alive and see each other's face? Glory and thanks to Jesus give for his almighty grace." I think maintaining grace under pressure, under stress, under anxiety is something that we are called to do as human beings, as good and decent people in the world. And thinking through that every day is new. Every day is a new day, and keeping that in mind, knowing that at some point we will be back together and see each other's face. And so that's meaningful to me.
Thank you so much, Joe, for all of the gifts that you lend to our community and for this time of reflection and sharing about how music is such a central part of your spiritual life and how your sharing of your gifts and lifting up the gifts of our community infuses our community with music into the glory of God. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my privilege.